Hi, everyone. I am excited to present to you Carmen Sneed. She is technical designer extraordinaire, and she's excited to talk to you guys more about what technical design is. So let me give her her official introduction. So this is Carmen Sneed. She is Senior Technical Design Manager at Popflex in Atlanta with over 30 years of industry experience spanning men's, women's, and children's wear. She specializes in technical design and pattern making. Her expertise includes Gerber systems, PLM systems for tech pack creation, Adobe Illustrator for construction detailing and grading, and of course, etc., etc. We just had to whittle it down because her experience is so expansive. So we're looking forward to talking with Carmen today. And I'll start with some questions and then we'll give you some time to ask questions at the end. Okay, everybody? Okay, they're on mute. All right, so Carmen, this question, it seems easy, but I don't know if it's that easy. What is technical design?
Right. So, and actually, I get a lot of this because people will say, "Oh, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm a technical designer." They're like, "What is that?" And a lot of times, like, you have to, like, people think it's a tech job, like computers. You're like, no, no. And, there is another role, a technical designer on the like IT side. So it
Yes.
gets mixed up a lot. But as far as apparel goes, we are actually kind of like apparel engineers in a way. So I always like to tell people, oh, you know how there's an architect and there's a civil engineer. Okay, well, they work together to make things work. One person will design it, another person makes it work and make sure everything's working together so it's functional. Because so the designer will start with a line drawing, a picture, and they'll send it to us, and they will have the fabric and pretty much what they want it to look like. By the time that I get it, I'm responsible for doing all the grading over all the sizes, making sure it fits everybody. And that's, one of the most important things. And making sure the construction is such that that garment can be made, that you're communicating all that to the factory. So it kind of, covers a little bit of everything that goes into making the garment. But we just don't come up with the initial design.
Yes,
If
that
that
totally
helps.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And would you say, I know for those who don't really understand and still need a little bit more clarification, is technical design pattern making or what's the difference?
It is not pattern making, but you have to know pattern making. So when we get the sketch, we're responsible for grading it out into all the sizes, and we're also responsible for the fit. So we work closely with the pattern makers. And we also do a little bit of pattern making ourselves. We work on Gerber systems. At my company anyway, we work on Gerber. So when we get a proto back from the factory, we'll look at it, we'll have to measure it, we'll have to analyze it, make sure everything was done correctly, and if not, find the problem. If there's a fit issue, we often give them a pattern making solution to fix it. So we'll go in Gerber, we'll pull their pattern up, we can look at their pattern and say, oh, well, I know why that's wrong, or this is what needs to change in order to fix this. So you do have to know pattern making and the rules of pattern making, so you're able to guide them correctly. And that you can go back and forth with them with issues and stuff, but they really rely on you to give them the fit solution. And what you're seeing, you're saying, oh, well, that shirt is hiking, well, how do you want to fix it? And I'll have to go in the pattern and show them how to fix it. And then that way, when the garment comes back, it'll be right, because you could leave it up to the vendor and maybe they'll know, but they probably don't.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they are just trying to meet your spec. When they see your numbers, they're trying to meet your spec. And sometimes the pattern comes back looking good and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes they'll reach out to you and say, this is going to work. And sometimes they won't. They'll just do it. And they'll say, but it met spec. I'm like, well, maybe the spec was a little off. So you really work together, but that's why it's important to know pattern making, so you know what can work and can't work, and what to do to fix those problems when they do happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are there some companies where the technical designer also actually makes the pattern? Have you ever been in a role like that?
They're usually two separate roles.
Okay,
Today, all the companies that I've worked at, there are two separate roles. Even like when I started in the industry years ago, um, they didn't have technical design to the point that they have it now, but there was still like one person that did specs and another person that did the patterns, and they're usually separated. I think it would probably be too much to do it all, you know,
mhm.
for one person to do it all, but definitely they work closely together. Yeah.
Got it, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. You kind of already said some of this, but let's kind of hone in on it a bit more. What are some of the important skills of a technical designer? Like, let's say you were hiring somebody, what would some of the skills that you're looking for be?
Well, one of the things that we've always tested for, because in my last company and the company that I work for now, we do, after an interview, if we like you, then we'll bring you back for a pattern test. And that's why, it is important that you know some pattern making, because what I like to do is show somebody a garment on the form and let them tell me what the problems are, because you have to have a good eye, and that's where the aesthetic does come in. You do have to kind of have that design background too, is really good, so you can know what looks good, but you can also see a problem. Like if they don't see the problem, then that's kind of alarming to me. Like if I see, some pants that are like riding up somebody's crotch, and no
Yeah,
one points it out, then I'm like, they didn't really notice that. That's not good. And
yeah,
so the first thing you want them to do is identify the problem. And then you want them to tell you how to fix it, and then fix it on the pattern. Like, okay, you told me what the problem was, you see it, but how would you address that, and how would you fix it? So that's really important. And then also some math skills, just like knowing basic grading. And I'm not saying you have to know the exact numbers, to use like the difference between the sizes or anything, but you have to do something that makes sense. So we might give you like measurements for a certain size, small, or we might, give you some numbers to kind of guide you. And then based on that, you have to put in the other graded numbers, but they have to make sense with each other. It
yeah.
can't just be any number. They have to make sense based on the other information that I gave you. So I would say that's really important. And then also construction, because if you can't tell somebody, or you don't know how the garment goes together, then how are you going to tell somebody else how to put it together? Right. And so, sewing construction is always, not that, we don't do that, because that's a misconception too, that we sit and sew all day, but, but you do need to know how to do it so you can guide somebody else as far as what stitches would be best when you're doing your construction detail. What would you use for a knit versus a woven, or what would you use if you wanted this type of effect on a garment, and to know stuff like that, so you would be able to tell the factory
That
and
makes
work with the factory. Yeah.
that makes sense. And let's say, because you mentioned, okay, if somebody got an initial opportunity to work with you, and then they got the opportunity to be called back, what were some of the skills you'd be looking for? How would somebody even get the opportunity to have that chance in the first place? Like, what are some of the portfolio requirements that would catch your eye to make you give somebody an opportunity?
Um, I think it depends on the level that you're at, because they're different levels. Like if you're looking for an assistant technical designer, I'm not going to expect them to be able to do all that. So as far as an assistant, somebody that's just starting out, you have to start in a role like that in order to gain that experience. It's the only way is to do it and work at it, and pay your dues, get those skills that take you to the next level. So usually at an assistant level, you would be measuring a lot. You might be given something simple to work at, or either just participating in fittings with the technical designer to see how it all works together, and learn those skills of fixing certain problems. I mean, that's the only way I learned, is to see others do it, or to be taught by by others, and you see a problem and you're like, I don't know how to fix that, but maybe your mentor or the person that's above you does, and they take the time to teach you and say, if you're seeing this, this is what you do. If you're seeing this, this is what this means. So
Yeah, that makes
that's
sense.
just, yeah. But starting in that assistant role and really taking the time to learn and you know grow, and not thinking that you know everything, because nobody does. And definitely listening, and just taking the time to learn, getting those years behind you. Yeah.
That makes sense. And if someone is interested in the starter role, like the assistant technical design role, what skills should they focus on and what should their portfolio show?
I mean, I think they should have a good understanding of, like, I mean, whatever, I'm not sure, what schools are really teaching today, but Gerber is always good to have if you go in, because a lot of people only deal with digital patterns now. A lot of, I'll say, like, older, people probably only be used to paper patterns, but if they had digital pattern making in their past, that's great. But people coming out of school, I think they're more used to the digital age, and if you've already got some um, 3D or digital pattern making from one of the systems, it's really great. Definitely Illustrator. Everybody uses Illustrator, so that's good. Starting out with those basic skills like that will take you far, and then you can learn the rest, and learn, because the fitting part and the pattern making part, that's all practice and just learning. It's like you're not going to come out of school just like knowing all that. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
gaining experience. Yeah. So
Fortunately for our students, they do have to go through the process of fitting and learning to adjust patterns and such like. So I think they're a little bit more advanced than some other schools in that regard. But in terms of the portfolio as well, yes, all of those skills that you mentioned, but they still do have to know like the same skills that the creative apparel designer has, the technical designer has as well, right? So like putting together those sketches and showing that you have a good taste level or a good eye for design. Is that important?
that is important. I mean, I will say a tiny bit less important than it is for
Right.
the creative side, for
Definitely.
but you do still have to have a good eye, because when you're building a spec, like, you're just going to get a sketch, and you have to make it look like the designer's vision actually on the person. And so a lot of times when I get a first sketch, I'll look at it, and you need to have a good eye for proportion in
Yeah.
your head. And so I'll look at it and go, okay, well, it's at somebody's waist, or it's below their waist, or whatever, or wherever it's hitting. I'll map it out. Either I'll map it out on the form, like the base size body form, or either on myself, because I happen to kind of match those measurements. And
Yeah.
I'll map it out on myself. I go, okay, well, this kind of looks good, based on what they've sketched. And okay, so this is where I'm going to place the waist. This is where I'm going to place the length of the dress, whatever, based on what our size small is, and based on what that sketch looks like. So you do have to have a good aesthetic eye to match that sketch
Yes,
with
for
reality.
perceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. All right. Okay, you answered that question already regarding the portfolio. Let us talk about the real world process. So, at the corporate level, what does a day in the life of a technical designer look like?
I would say at the corporate level, unfortunately, there are a lot of meetings, and it takes away from you getting to actually do your job.
Yeah.
But meetings after meetings after meetings about meetings. And so you will, like, we would get a handoff from the designers, and it'll be like a lot of sketches, and there's always pretty tight time limit that you have, to get those initial specs out. So a lot of times it is a lot of late nights when you have those deadlines and stuff, because they expect you to get it out in a week, but they don't care that you have 5 meetings a day that each
Yeah.
last an hour.
Yeah.
They're like, so I don't understand what the problem is. So you are like working a lot, late nights when you do have those deadline times come. And not only will you have the deadlines of building your specs, you'll have the deadlines of doing comments back to the vendors at that same time, because you'll be working on a season, but then you'll have the current season that you're also like, you'll be working on a season that's not going to launch for like a year from now, but you'll also be solving problems from the current season that you're in. And you'll also have stuff that's in production from another season you're already working on. So
Yeah.
so you'll be working on concept, you'll be working on fits for an upcoming season, and you'll get stuff coming from the factories, and they'll expect you to, look at it, fit it with design, and have those comments done within about 5 days, or they'll be complaining they want a quick turnaround so they can make their corrections and get another sample to you. But you're also building specs, and you're also in meetings, and you're also, so it's kind of crazy because you're usually working on about 3 seasons at a time in different stages.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's
You mentioned two terms that I want a little bit more clarification on, just for students and anybody else who is listening. You mentioned handoffs and you mentioned specs. So can you explain to us what a handoff is, and then later a spec? What is a spec?
Okay, so a handoff would be like, the designer gives the initial sketch and they're handing it off to you, which means they're presenting it to you for the first time. And that's your opportunity to look through it, ask any questions, and oftentimes tell them how the sketch needs to be corrected in order to make it right. So you might see a sketch and it's got a wrong hem on it or something. Maybe it has a straight line instead of a dotted line, or maybe, it's just not sketched accurately for what it has to be. Maybe the back doesn't work with the front or something. And so it's your time to bring up those concerns so design can revise and get that back to you as soon as possible. So it's just like a meeting, a discussion meeting to make sure everything's right, that they're handing off to you.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, and then the next one
The
was
spec. What is a spec?
spec. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so the spec is the graded specification that you're giving to the vendor. So you're going to start with your base size, and then you're going to grade it out depending on what you're working on. Extra small to 3X, whatever, or it just depends on what your base size is. You're going to grade it out through all those sizes. And then the spec also, for some companies, they have tech designers do the construction, some they don't. So if your company has tech design do the construction, then you also have to do your construction page. And that is done in Illustrator, and you'll have their sketch, and you'll be pointing out all the stitches, like, this needs a cover stitch, this needs whatever, straight stitch, whatever it needs.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they like to have the number of the stitch, like a 406 or a 101 or a 301. They like to have that. And so usually you'll be given a guide as to, what those numbers are, because they are standard throughout the industry. And whether a factory reads English or Mandarin or whatever, they'll know those numbers. So.
Okay, good. And in terms of like the graded sizes, the company will let you know what their standards are, right? They will let you know, like, or do you as a technical designer have to build that out?
Well, so I've been in companies where, yes, they already have standards, and I've been in companies where, no, you're at the beginning and you need to make those standards. And so we always, in most of the companies that I've worked in, we use what we call ASTM. And so there are companies that do studies, and they study the human body, because as a technical designer, it is your job to know how the body grows depending on what category you're working on, whether it's children's, women's, men's.
And when she say how the body grows, she means
right.
Like from one size to the next.
Another,
like these are the measurements for size 8, this is for size 10, this is 12. What's the difference from bust, waist, hip, etc.
Exactly. Like you're supposed to know how the body grows. And in kids, it's even harder because, they grow so fast and so strangely. They're growing up and out. In adults, they're only growing up. I mean, they're only growing out. Sorry. We just start growing out. So it really depends on what category you're doing. But ASTM is a wonderful tool. It stands for American Society for Testing and Materials. And that is the government. Actually, the U.S. government has an agency that tests all kinds of things. And the body growth is actually just one of the categories that they test. They test all kinds of things. But that's a normal scale that we'll use in the apparel industry to base our grading on. Like if you want to know, it won't be like size small to size medium. It's going to give you measurements like size 6. So this is a standard size 6 according to this, this agency's
Research.
testing,
Yeah.
research and testing. They research tons of bodies. They scan people, they measure people. That's what they do. And so this is an industry size 6. If you want to go to a size 8, this is the difference. If you want to go to a size 10, this is the difference, and et cetera. And then, so say like the company that I'm at right now, we don't use numerical, we use alpha. So small, medium, large. And so you have to determine with your company, what is a small? So ours might be a 6 to 8. Okay, so I'm going to look at ASTM. I'm going to, okay, what's their 6 to 8? Okay, that's going to be my standard. Okay, and when I'm going to medium, they're saying, and my medium is going to be 8 to 10. And I'll say, okay, well, what is the difference between the 6 and the 10? Because you always want to go to the largest part of the scale, so it'll cover everybody in that range. So I'm not going to go jump to the size 8. I'm going to jump to the size 10 to know that, that's going to be the largest part of the range. And so you'll start to understand like how the body grows in width, length, arms, legs, everything, head, shoulders, bust, waist. Yeah. So it's really like knowing that, how everything is growing. And then, those are just the basics, because they're just going to give you like basic body measurements. But when you get into things like the garment actually growing, then that's really when your math skills come in, because you may, grade, from your high point of shoulder to your waist, that grades a certain way, and ASTM may tell you how that grades. But say you have an empire waist in there. Okay, well, you have to know that's, how that's going to grade compared to, your high point shoulder to your waist. That,
Yes.
you may not have your underbust. ASTM is not going to give you that. So maybe you grade it half of what ASTM is giving you. So it's really like understanding how all those points of measure work with the basics that ASTM gives you. So yeah. And your spec will tell you all that, and the garment, the picture that they give you will let you know like what exact points of measure that you need to tell the pattern maker how to make this. So
yes,
yeah,
makes sense. Makes perfect sense. Well, to me, later on, I'll ask.
Right. It is else. Rather complicated,
but it's so interesting though. It's very interesting. I think your description earlier when you said the engineering side, yeah, I think that's accurate. All right, so we spoke about spec, we spoke about handoff. What is a tech pack? What's in?
Okay, so a tech pack is pretty much everything that the factory needs to make that garment. And it's not only what tech design gives you. So there are lots of departments, depending on your company, there are lots of departments that will contribute to that tech pack. So normally, technical design will give you the graded spec and the construction. Design will give you the sketch. They'll give you the fabrics, that stuff. Sometimes there's a department that one of my companies, we called it product development, department, and they would do the BOM, which is the bill of materials, and that is a whole list of every material that the company needs to buy to make this garment. And it's going to have the fabric, might have, outer fabric, inner fabric, elastic, any kind of bows or trims or anything that they need, like material wise to build this out. And it's going to, depending on the company, they'll tell you, where to source that, like where they want you to buy it from, because they want a specific, number or style number from this company. This is where they want you to get it. And some companies will have the vendor source it for them. So it just depends, but it's really just a list of everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So that's what a tech pack is. And tell us a little bit more about fittings.
So when we go into fittings, usually the technical designer will lead the fitting, because we're the ones with the garment, we've measured it. You really should go in knowing, okay, what's right about it, what's wrong about it, and you can present that to the designer, and they'll let you know what they like, what they don't like, and that's just kind of basic. What are we going to change aesthetically? It's like, yeah, I don't really like where you put that that waist, and you can say, oh well, it's an inch off, it's an inch too short from what I asked for, and do you want to go back to spec, or do you want to change it another way? And you'll have those conversations with them. And then there's the other part of the fit where things just aren't fitting the body right. And so you'll see, oh, it's gaping in the armhole, or it's hiking up, it's whatever it's doing. You'll have to identify those, and that's where the pattern corrections come in. Like, you'll have to come up with a pattern solution to fix that problem.
Yes,
So
yes.
yeah.
And the fittings, tell us, are those done with a live person, like an actual fit model, or are they done on a mannequin?
It depends.
Mm-hmm.
So it's best to have it on a live person. That's what the company that I work for, that's what we do most of the time. But it also depends. If it's something small, we've looked at several times, and we don't really need a live model. Just to throw it on one more time and just make sure what we corrected is good. Then that's fine. You can use a mannequin for that, but most of the time a live model. Now in children's wear, that becomes a lot more challenging because children grow so fast. And my previous company, we used live models every week for a time. And then during COVID, we couldn't, because we couldn't have children coming into the building. And we weren't even coming into the building.
Yeah.
But that's when we switched to forms. And we just totally did it on forms, because children's is a little bit more um, standard in the fact that you don't have as many like serious fit problems. They're much straighter in body, not a lot of curves.
Yeah.
And so, because the most of the fit problems come in women, we're real curvy. We have a lot of curves, a lot of stuff that we have to like fit over. But you don't really have that a lot in children's, and so it's not as serious. But it's really hard to find a lot of children that are going to behave well, that are going to come in and and do well during a fitting, and you're constantly looking for them because they're constantly growing and they're constantly growing out of their size. So it's a lot easier for a company to use a mannequin in that case. And I will say most people probably use a mannequin for kids. And
I worked in newborn infant toddler for a while, and well, especially in the newborn, we used to have like a newborn baby come in, and we know we have to move fast before that baby start crying. So.
Right, you only have a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
And we even had, if we couldn't get a newborn baby, we had dolls that matched the newborn as best as we could, and with a diaper on and everything. But yeah, see, you do what you have to do.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot, like especially with the fittings and the handoffs, etc. Designer and technical designer really work hand in hand a lot. What is the best type of designer to work with in terms of like their personality traits or the interpersonal skills that makes their job easier?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so definitely someone who is very receptive to what tech has to say, and open to the changes that they are saying that are needed. Because I used to work with a lot of designers a long time ago that it didn't matter what you said, they were stubborn. Like, no, this is how I want it to be, this is what I want it to look like, and you're like, but that's not going to work for this. But they don't care, and you're like, I don't know what to do. And honestly, if you kind of have an attitude like that, they're going to go ahead and do it. The tech is going to go ahead and do what they need to do anyway, because they need to make the garment look right. You can't always follow, if you've got a stubborn designer that is just, not going to budge just because they want what they want. You have to do what's right for your job, because ultimately it's going to fall on you. And when it doesn't fit right, they're going to come back to the tech designer and say, what happened? And oftentimes you'll say, if you go back to the designer and say, well, the designer told me, they're like, why are you listening? Why? I don't understand why. Because you're the expert. Yeah, so you pretty much have to do, but somebody who's willing to work with everybody. And I mean, the best type of designer is someone who has that construction, like knows about that already. They know about construction, they know about fabrics, they, and they know what they know, but they admit what they don't know as far as the fit, but they're willing to work with you and really want to do what's best for the garment. And I'll say on both sides, technical and the aesthetic design, you cannot be stubborn. You have to be willing, open-minded, and be willing to work with everybody and just get the garment right. And if somebody has a better idea than you, great, but don't be like, oh, it's not my idea, so I don't like that. you,
Yeah.
you will not get far. Like, please don't be like that.
I agree. I agree.
And that's more prevalent than you think.
Yeah. All right. So you worked at several different companies at this point and also in several different departments, whether, women's, children, men, whatever. What are some of the differences in skills required for a technical designer?
I mean,
Oh,
I
yeah.
would I would think they're about the same. The only difference is knowing that product category that you're working on at the time. Like children's is totally different from women's. I've when I worked in children's, we've had technical designers come in that have only worked in adults, and they just like did not understand like the grading that we had for children's, and they would come in and they would immediately say, that's all wrong, that's wrong, that can't be right. And like, have you ever worked in children's? No. And like, and if you had, you would know that children's grading is crazy. It looks nothing like women's, it looks nothing like men's. It's crazy because of the rate the children grow at. And so if you've never been in that situation, then you maybe not be familiar. But that's the main thing, the body growth and familiarizing yourself with that product, men, women, children's, whatever it is. And just knowing that if you've never been in there before, if you've never worked with this before, it is going to be different from what you worked with before. You can't, they're not all the same. So, that's the main difference. Otherwise, the pattern, the pattern rules are the same. All that. It's just getting to know that new product and
That
how
product.
that body is different. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, and maybe also knowing that specific company, right? Because
Yeah.
like sometimes the fit expectations change depending on the
Yes.
brand, the company. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I remember one time during a pattern test of, somebody, and they were like, oh, well, it looks like, it's pushing out the boobs a little too much. It looks like it's kind of tight. And the designer's like, oh no, that's what we like.
That's what
And
we
she was like,
like.
oh, okay. If that's what you like, that's your aesthetic. But that's
Yeah.
also learning your designer and learning that that's what they like.
Yeah.
And you may have seen that as a fit problem before, but in this new company, it's good. Or maybe somebody like you've worked in children's and you come to a new company and you say, oh, well, it looks like, that back rise is really like cutting in. Like it's really like, and they're like, oh, no, that's what they want because they want something booty lifting. But
Yeah,
that's not what
yeah.
you want in kids. And so you have to kind of change, like, oh, okay, okay. I know
Ah,
what you want now.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so what garment categories have you worked in and what's been your favorite so far?
I think my favorite now is what I'm doing now because, like in women's, especially women's sportswear, you get to do a whole lot of different designs and nothing is standard. And you're just trying to make it cute. And with women, there's a lot of creativity. You can do anything, and it's really great. It's not like men's and boys. It's kind of like it
Yeah,
can
it's
be
like it's
it
a
can be
shirt.
kind of standard and boring. It can be. I think you have a lot of like creativity in women's that is not there in the other categories because even children, like as far as girls, you can only go so far because you don't want anything obscene on a little girl, but in women's they don't care. Sometimes it's what they want. so,
Yeah.
so it's definitely a lot more creativity. Yeah.
Got
So
it, got it. Okay.
definitely.
And how did you get into technical design? What did your career journey look like?
So when I graduated from school in 94, there was no technical design, really. It was more, just design and pattern making. But as, the industry started to shift and more jobs started to go overseas, traditional pattern makers here started to change into, what they created was technical design, which was really the the company had people that knew pattern making, but their jobs just shifted into giving information to the vendors because all the, people overseas that were sourcing it was like full package. So, and when I mean full package is they did everything except, you get the initial company will give them the instructions, but after that, they do everything. They've got the pattern makers, they've got the cutters, the sewers, everything. So, mainly in the United States, what we did was design and technical design. We had sourcing departments. That's when sourcing came into play because when I was in school, they didn't have sourcing. They didn't teach sourcing, but now they do. So, so all these new, professions started to come, and technical design was one of them that just kind of merged. So I started out actually. I worked for Buster Brown Apparel, which is not even around anymore. I did like babies, and I actually started out like doing first patterns for their first garments, and this was before the pattern maker even got it. I would get a sketch, and they'd go, "Okay, do a pattern for it." So it's for it, so the sample room can mock it up real quick, and we can have it to show. Because the pattern maker didn't even see it until we decided it was going to go in production. And then they would do production patterns for it. So that's what I started out doing. And then my next job was a full on pattern maker for a small company. And so my progression, that's just where I found my opportunities were in more in pattern making. And then it kind of morphed into, technical design. But I was always more technically minded than the aesthetic. And so you just kind of have to like know yourself, like what if you're definitely more into the aesthetics, then that you're more of a creative designer. If you're into the numbers and the pattern making and that excites you more, you're more apt for technical design. So
Yeah.
but I just kind of morphed into it as the industry changed.
Yeah, that
So
makes
yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. I think we touched on this, but let me see if we can get a little deeper. What does an entry-level technical design role look like, if you can remember, or
Um,
if you
I
can
like
tell me?
an assistant technical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
assistant.
it's more measuring and basically learning what your craft is. They might find more simple tasks for you, or once they see that you're progressing in what you're learning, then they might give you some small things to handle and see how you can take those like all the way through, from initiation to production. But you're just gonna start small, and they're gonna give you a lot of menial tasks at first, especially like measuring, because that's what
Yeah.
everybody hates to do. Measuring or more like data entry. A lot of assistants, like during fittings, they'll take notes. So that way design and technical design don't have to write while they analyze and everything. So you're taking notes, so you're kind of learning the language that you need to speak to the vendor. So learning how to talk to them, and like I would always tell the assistant or whoever's taking notes, can you say it like this or say this? Because a lot of times they don't know how to say it so the vendor will understand it. And so it's a lot of learning that language, learning how to communicate with the vendors, measuring like any kind of data entry into the PLM system,
Yeah.
any kind of setup. Sometimes we would have them set up our construction detail, not build it out, but just set it up with the sketch, and so we can go in there and just do what we have to do. So any kind of you know task to
Yeah.
make our jobs easier. Yeah.
Yeah, like a support role while you're
Yeah.
learning, you're actively learning. That makes sense. So have you ever had, because you mentioned that technical design has so much to do with fit. And I remember when I was working at Target, one of the projects that technical design did that I thought was so interesting was, for example, they'd have a pair of jeans that were target standard, and they do a comparison with all the different competitors and what their size 8 was looking like compared to our size 8. Have you ever been involved in a fit project like that, or any large scale technical design projects?
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
so that's something that's pretty common in the industry, to buy competitor samples and see how they fit next to you. You're usually going to compare it to your main competitors, like maybe the top like 5 main competitors that you have, and just see where you are versus them, and what customers are saying about them versus what customers are saying about you in the fit, and you're just trying to make your fit better. But definitely I've done a lot of Excel sheets that that compare all that, where we are versus customers. And sometimes a company will base, you know, I've been at companies where they just totally base what they think is right based on what everybody else is doing. And then, but I'd say more the company that I'm at now, we like what we like. And
Yeah.
it's not based on what anybody else thinks necessarily. It's like you like what you like, and you're doing this for a purpose. So people do it for different reasons, but it's usually so you can like say, oh well, we're going to change to what they're doing because their sales are better, or
Yeah, yeah. And I guess that goes back to really understanding your brand, whether it is that you're working for an established brand or if it is your own brand, knowing what your identity is so that
right.
you don't sway if somebody else happens to be doing it differently.
Right. Right.
Could you
Yeah.
tell
And
me?
that is different because some people, big corporations, they're working for the profit. So it's money's always the bottom line.
Yeah,
And that's not the case with a lot of smaller companies. So
yeah,
they're trying to express themselves more.
yeah,
So it's what is your why? What is
yeah. That's a good point, and I love that point.
yeah.
One of my favorite points is what is your why? All right. What is PLM? You mentioned it, and I want to make sure that they understand what PLM is.
So PLM is just a acronym for product lifecycle management, and a lot of different companies make PLM systems, but it's basically a computer system that houses all information about your company and in your company. It's the one source of truth. So everything feeds from that. People will do, you'll do your specs in there. You'll do your bill of materials in there. You'll have all your fabrics in there. You'll have all your costing in there. Like everything is in there, and you can make tech packs from it to send to the vendor. And it's not only used for apparel. Like any company that's making a widget will use like a PLM system, depending on how advanced they are, to house all the information about all their products. So it's basically like a widget management system.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah, I
So, but
love
you're
that.
doing everything in there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes things sound so fancy when you're not exactly in the role or in the industry. But I like to simplify it and say it's just like if you think about a large company, it would be pretty crazy for people to just be emailing information back and forth. It would get really confusing. So PLM is a way to house all of the information about that style, so it keep things really streamlined and
Yeah.
organized, and everybody knows
Right.
where to get the most accurate information, whether that's the sketch or the fabric, etc.
Exactly.
Easy.
Exactly.
All right. Let's talk about the profitability side. How does technical design impact sales and profitability?
I mean, I would say the easiest answer is fit, because that's one of the most important things. Like, you'll see it on the website, you'll see it in the store, and you'll go, "Oh, that's so cute." But if you buy it and you bring it home and it fits terribly, you're never going back to that brand again. You've lost trust. And the best thing is to get it home and you're like, "Oh wow, I love this fit." And you're gonna say, "You know what? They fit me. They have my size or size inclusive. It fits great. That's my brand. I'm going back to them." But if the fit's bad, they're not. Yeah. So it's the repeat customers. They're bringing
Yeah,
back those repeat customers. Yeah.
I agree. I agree. And just that level of trust. So they know that, this is my brand. They always fit me if I buy size 8, size 10, whatever. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I love that. Okay. How do the skills of a technical designer transfer into entrepreneurship? What do you think about that? How could that happen?
I mean, I would say I mean, I know technical designers that totally freelance and they freelance their skills to different companies. If you wanted to go that route, I mean, you could still totally, if you had the business mindset and, you could still make start your own company if, you wanted to work towards that. I think that you have all the skills that you need as long as you have the business part of it too. It's like if a designer wanted to start their own company and they had the business mind, they could do it just as well as as a technical designer. It's just more about having the will to do it. Because I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, yeah.
Yeah,
But
you're right. It's
but I mean, if you just wanted to stay a technical designer and be an entrepreneur, you could you know um, offer yourself as a contractor to anybody who that would hire you. I see a lot of offers on Indeed, like want a freelance technical designer for a certain period of time. It's just not very steady, but some people do like to
yeah,
work that way. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then also like especially for our students because they're gaining the creative design skills and the technical design skills. So as an entrepreneur, you have to be able to wear all the hats.
Yeah, I think you have to understand. If you don't understand all that, it's important to hire people that do,
Yeah,
like, and be willing to hire people that do and listen to them. But if you already know a lot of that stuff, that I think you've got a leg up. You know um, what needs to happen in the process, and
yeah,
you have those skills. So that's really good. I mean, eventually, of course, you still need to hire people, but at least you know what's going on. So
yeah.
I think you do have a leg up.
A leg up if you know both sides. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. All right. What are some of the biggest production mistakes small brands make that a technical designer could prevent? Whether small or large, it doesn't matter. But what are some of the mistakes that having a technical designer on staff would
Um,
prevent?
Definitely knowing the grading, knowing how the body grows, knowing, and it goes back to fit. And I mean, I've worked with brands that didn't have a technical designer previously, and they had major fit problems. And that was solved when they brought a technical designer on. So I think that's the main thing. You can put a bunch of numbers on a sheet of paper and they don't make sense, and you don't know what you're doing. And I mean, I've bought stuff from brands before that totally didn't fit, and I'm like, I don't know what they're doing. That maybe they don't do technical design, maybe they don't do fittings. I don't know, but I would say fit is the main thing.
Yes, I agree. I agree. All right, so let's talk about you and get a little bit more personal insight. What is the hardest part of being a technical designer? You're a manager now, so yeah.
I think the hardest part is it's probably just gaining all those skills. You have to know so many different things. It's not just like one skill, and just getting that experience and bringing it all together. I mean, I still have challenges after like almost 30 years. I still, we have some major fit issues, and they'll just be like brain scratchers on how to fix it with the pattern. And we get some pretty strange looking stuff. So I would say you're always going to be learning, and that's always going to be the challenge. I mean, most of the technical designers I work with now, we've been doing it for years, and we consult with each other. It's like never be afraid to keep on asking, get other opinions, and it's great because you do have stuff, a person to bounce stuff off of, and you do have a second opinion, and sometimes somebody will say something, you're like, that's it, and so it doesn't get easier with that. Like, just when you think you know everything, something will come to you and it'll be like, I'm gonna fix that. And yeah, so I'd say, yeah, the pattern correction is probably one of the hardest things.
Okay.
Definitely.
Got it, got it. And what's the most rewarding part of your job?
Oh, definitely when you like like you see people online talking about it. You're like, especially like with plus size, because that plus size is really hard to fit.
I could
And when you see plus size women going, "Oh my gosh, I love it. They fit me." I'm like, "Yes, yes, we got it." Because
yeah.
that's what we'll spend most of our time on. I mean, the more curves, the more of a challenge. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. I guess that's why, some people complain about the type of bodies that they see go down the runway. It's just because it's easier. It's just
Oh
easier
yeah,
and
it's
less
easy.
curves.
Everything fits the size small perfectly. It's like,
Yeah,
okay, first time, second time, okay, you got it. You're spending your other time on the plus size, and you're
yeah.
like, no, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, but it takes more time. It definitely does. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then I'll let this be the last question before I open it up for Q&A. What would you say separates an average technical designer from an exceptional one?
I mean, an average one would probably just be one that doesn't have as much experience. You may be good at putting in the numbers and stuff, and doing the, just the basics. But if you don't learn everything else, all the nuances, like how the body grows, how to fix fit problems, how everything works together. If you change one thing, something else is gonna need to be changed too. It's like you can't just change something and it doesn't affect anything else. Like you just have to know how it all kind of like meshes together to work together, and be willing to listen to your vendors, with your pattern makers and stuff, because they will come back to you and ask you questions or ask you to clarify stuff. And just be willing to work with them. A lot of times we'll be like, I know I need this POM, but I really don't know how to measure it, or I don't know what that number should be. Can you, when you do the pattern, can you let me know? You're working with people, and so and pattern makers are more than willing to work with you, that way. Just being open and knowing that you don't know everything, yeah,
Yeah.
is, yeah.
I agree,
Yeah.
Carmen. I
Yeah.
agree. All right. So right now I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to ask any questions that they might have. So give me 1 second now and I'll just